People haven't caught this yet, but just hours ago, a stimulus update allegedly shifted direction without a press conference, without headlines, and without most Americans noticing. And that matters, because if you misunderstand what just changed, you could assume help is coming when it's not, or miss relief you actually qualify for. Prices are still high, fixed incomes are stretched thin, and this revised plan changes who gets paid, when, and why. Stay with me because clarity right now protects your money. If you are interested in this topic, please like, comment, and share to pass this information to others, and I will give a heart. What's happening right now did not start today, and that's the first thing most people misunderstand. This relief update did not appear out of thin air. It was allegedly triggered by weeks of quiet pressure building inside Washington. Not political speeches, not cable news debates. Data. Hard numbers that don't lie even when politicians try to ignore them. Inflation reports, cost of living indexes, rent data, grocery pricing, energy bills, healthcare premiums. When officials looked at the full picture, one reality became impossible to ignore. For millions of households, especially seniors and people on fixed incomes, expenses are still running significantly higher than they were just 2 years ago. In some categories, double digits higher. That matters because relief programs are not built on emotion. They are built on thresholds. When costs stay elevated long enough, the math breaks for people living on predictable monthly income. And once that happens, pressure moves fast behind the scenes. Here's where things shifted. Earlier versions of this relief plan were drafted with a broad approach in mind: simple eligibility, fast distribution, wide coverage. On paper, it looked generous, but when budget analysts ran the numbers forward, they found a problem. The original structure would have pushed spending well beyond what was set aside, allegedly by tens of billions over the next fiscal cycle. That's when the pause happened. Not publicly, quietly. Agencies started reassessing whether sending money to everyone again made sense, especially after earlier stimulus rounds showed a pattern. Some households needed help urgently. Others received money they didn't truly need, while vulnerable groups continued falling behind. That's the uncomfortable truth few people like to say out loud. So the plan was revised, and this revision is the most important thing to understand because it changes how you should think about eligibility entirely. This is no longer about blanket checks. It is about targeting. Instead of asking, is there a stimulus, the better question now is, how does the system decide who needs help first? Under the revised framework, relief is allegedly being redirected toward households showing documented financial strain. Not opinions, not social media posts, documented strain that already exists in federal data systems. That includes people whose income has not kept pace with inflation, people who rely on federal benefits, people whose expenses take up a larger share of fixed monthly income, retirees, disability recipients, low and moderate income workers whose earnings have stayed flat while costs climbed. This is why some people are positioned to benefit sooner than expected, while others may assume they qualify and then find out they don't. And that's where confusion starts, because this version of the plan does not rely on new applications. That is intentional. Officials involved have allegedly made it clear they do not want people scrambling to fill out forms while bills are overdue. So instead of opening a new system, agencies are using data they already have: Social Security records, IRS filings, benefit enrollment data, income history, payment methods already on file. This speeds things up for some people, but it also creates blind spots. If your information is outdated, if your income changed recently, if your filing status no longer reflects your reality, that's where surprises happen. Not because you're being punished, but because the system hasn't caught up yet. And that's the risk people need to understand early, not after payments start rolling out. Another major change sits in the timeline. Past stimulus rounds trained people to expect one big nationwide release, everyone watching their accounts at the same time. That is not how this plan is structured. The revised relief uses phased distribution. That means payments are released in waves, starting with the most financially vulnerable groups, then expanding outward as funding and data allow. This approach gives officials flexibility. If conditions worsen, they can expand. If inflation spikes again, they can slow things down. One senior advisor reportedly described it as sustainability over spectacle. That tells you a lot. This plan is not designed to generate headlines, it's designed to adjust. And that's why rumors online right now are so dangerous. Some posts claim everyone will be paid within days. Others claim the program is dead. Both are wrong. The reality sits in the middle. The relief plan is alive, but it is narrower, more controlled, and more dependent on your actual financial profile than before. That brings us to why this matters to you personally, because eligibility is no longer about whether relief exists. It's about whether your situation signals need under the revised criteria. And that's the shift most people haven't caught yet. This is also why officials have been careful with public statements. They don't want people making financial decisions based on assumptions. They don't want households counting on money that may arrive later or in a different form than expected. And they definitely don't want a repeat of past confusion where expectations ran ahead of reality. So where does this leave you right now? It leaves you in a position where awareness matters more than urgency. Understanding how the system is thinking is more valuable than chasing dates, because the people who benefit most from plans like this are usually the ones who stay informed early, keep their records accurate, and don't rely on rumors to guide decisions. In the next part, we're going to get specific. We'll break down who is prioritized under this revised framework, how income and benefits factor into payment decisions, and why two people with similar situations could experience very different timelines. That's where clarity replaces anxiety. Stay with me, because once you understand how the eligibility signals work, the rest of this plan stops feeling confusing and starts making sense.
What everyone wants to know now is simple, but the answer is not. Who actually gets paid under this revised relief plan, and why some people are prioritized while others are told to wait? And this is where misunderstanding can cost people time, money, and peace of mind if they rely on old stimulus rules instead of how this system works today. Because under this framework, eligibility is not emotional, it is signal-based. And those signals are pulled from data that already exists inside federal systems, not from new forms or fresh applications, which is both an advantage and a risk depending on your situation. So let's break this down clearly, starting with the group that is most firmly on the radar: Social Security beneficiaries, including retirement, SSDI, and SSI recipients. According to officials briefed on the revised structure, individuals receiving federal benefits and reporting combined annual income under roughly $48,000 are prioritized in the earliest payment wave. And this matters because it includes millions of retirees living on fixed monthly checks that have not kept pace with real-world inflation. It includes disability recipients whose benefits adjust slowly while costs rise quickly, and it includes SSI recipients who already sit at the lowest income thresholds in the system. For this group, relief amounts allegedly being discussed range from $600 to $1,200, depending on income level and household size. But here is where people make a mistake. Timing for Social Security recipients does not work like a lottery drop. Payments would follow the same delivery method already on file, direct deposit or direct express, and would likely align with existing benefit schedules, which means two people qualifying for the same amount could receive it weeks apart based purely on payment cycles, not favoritism or delay. And that distinction matters because it explains why panic starts online when one person posts a deposit and another sees nothing yet. Now moving to the next major group, low and moderate income workers who filed taxes last year. If you reported adjusted gross income below $75,000 as an individual or $150,000 as a joint filer, you are within the eligibility window. But this time, qualification is not automatic, and this is one of the biggest changes people are missing. Eligibility is allegedly being cross-checked against earnings consistency, meaning officials are looking at whether income has remained flat or declined over time, rather than spiking temporarily. The goal is to identify households under sustained pressure rather than short-term fluctuations, which is why some people who qualified for earlier stimulus checks may not qualify this time, while others who missed out before could now be included. For this group, projected relief ranges from $5,000 to $1,000 with additional amounts for dependents. But again, timing depends on how current your data is. If your income changed significantly in the last 6 months due to job loss, reduced hours, medical leave, or caregiving responsibilities, that change may not yet be reflected in the datasets being used. And that does not mean you are excluded forever. It means your eligibility may fall into a later review window rather than the first wave. And this is where patience matters more than outrage. Now let's talk about dependents, because this is another area where assumptions cause confusion. Under the revised plan, dependent-based relief is structured as a supplement, not a base payment, meaning dependents do not trigger relief on their own, they add to an already qualifying household. For families that meet eligibility criteria, this could mean an additional $200 to $300 per dependent under 18, but eligibility here is tightly linked to tax filing status, custody reporting, and dependency claims. If there are discrepancies, such as shared custody, amended returns, or recent household changes, payments could be delayed while records are reconciled. And yes, that is frustrating, but it is also why officials slowed the rollout rather than rushing money out inaccurately. Now here is the part that requires realism. Middle-income households above the primary thresholds are not prioritized in the initial phase. That does not mean exclusion, it means sequencing. Internal documents reportedly describe this approach as responsive relief, which means the plan can expand or contract based on economic conditions. If inflation remains elevated and consumer stress continues, additional waves become more likely. If conditions stabilize, expansion may pause, and this flexibility is intentional. Now listen carefully, because this next point is critical. No new application process has been announced. Payments are expected to be issued using existing records from the Social Security Administration, the IRS, and Treasury databases. That speeds things up, but also makes accuracy essential. Outdated bank information, old mailing addresses, incorrect filing status, those are the things that cause delays, not favoritism or denial. And this is why people see others get paid while they wait, not because they were skipped, but because their data requires reconciliation. Now about dates, there is no official confirmation of exact payment days. Anyone claiming specific deposit dates right now is speculating. What officials have said is that early-stage disbursements are expected once final data alignment is complete, with phased payments continuing afterward. This plan prioritizes precision over speed alone, and while that frustrates people used to instant answers, it reduces the risk of errors that create months-long delays later. And here is the reassurance most people need to hear. Relief plans like this rarely end with one wave. They evolve. As data updates, as conditions shift, and as public pressure builds, adjustments follow. And that brings us to the most important takeaway from this part. Who gets paid depends less on headlines and more on how your situation appears inside federal records right now. And understanding that puts you ahead of most people reacting emotionally online. In the next part, we're going to focus on what happens next, what signs to watch for, what mistakes to avoid, and how to stay positioned without stress while this plan continues to develop, because knowing how the system moves is how you protect yourself without panic.
At this stage, the most important thing to understand is not just who may get paid, but how this revised relief plan continues to move after the first wave, because that is where most people either protect themselves or get caught off guard. And the biggest mistake right now is assuming silence means nothing is happening, when in reality, this phase is about alignment. Agencies involved are allegedly focused on syncing data between the Treasury Department, the Social Security Administration, and the IRS, and that process determines how far the plan can expand or how tightly it needs to stay focused. This is not a delay for the sake of delay, it is a checkpoint. Officials are watching inflation readings, employment data, consumer spending, and public response very closely because each of those factors influences whether additional payment waves are triggered or paused. If household stress remains elevated and costs stay high, the system has room to expand relief outward. If conditions stabilize or inflation spikes again, the plan can slow without collapsing entirely. And this is what makes the current approach different from past stimulus rounds. It is designed to adjust rather than commit all funding up front, which reduces the risk of sudden reversals later. Now, here's where people need clarity. If you do not qualify in the first phase, that does not mean you are excluded permanently. It means your situation may fall into a later review window as updated data becomes available. This is especially relevant for people whose income or household situation changed recently. Job loss, reduced hours, medical issues, caregiving responsibilities, or delayed tax filings. Those changes often lag behind real life by months inside federal systems, and that gap is where anxiety grows. But it is also where patience pays off, because relief decisions are being made based on verified data, not assumptions. Now, let's talk about what you should be watching for, because this is how you stay ahead instead of stressed. First, official communications, not screenshots, not forwarded messages, not anonymous posts claiming inside knowledge. Real updates come through Treasury statements, SSA notices, and IRS bulletins, and they often arrive quietly before mainstream coverage catches up. Second, accuracy. This sounds simple, but it matters more than most people realize. Your bank information, mailing address, and tax filing status need to be correct. Outdated information does not disqualify you, but it can delay payments significantly, and delays are what fuel fear online. Third, expectations. This plan is not built for instant gratification, it is built for targeted stability. Expecting overnight deposits sets people up for frustration. Understanding phased rollout sets people up for calm. And here's something officials have been careful not to say loudly, but is important to understand. Relief like this is not a one-time decision, it is a process. Data refreshes happen, thresholds get reviewed, and pressure from voters and economic reality influences adjustments over time. That is why staying informed matters more than reacting emotionally to each rumor. Now, let's address a concern many people have but rarely say out loud. What if I do everything right and still have to wait? The honest answer is that waiting does not mean failure, it means sequencing. And sequencing is how modern relief is managed to avoid system overload and funding shortfalls. The system is trying to prevent the chaos that followed earlier rounds, where errors took months to correct. And while that caution feels slow, it reduces long-term harm. Now, here is the reassurance that matters most. This revised relief plan is not a signal that help is disappearing. It is a signal that policymakers are trying to deliver aid in a way that lasts without triggering new problems. And while no system is perfect, the intent here is to support those under real strain without creating confusion or false expectations. So if you're feeling uncertain right now, take a breath. Uncertainty does not mean exclusion, it means the process is still unfolding, and people who stay informed, keep their records accurate, and avoid rumor-driven decisions are the ones who benefit most as plans evolve. In the final part, we're going to bring everything together clearly, what this update really means for your money, how to think about timing realistically, and how to stay protected as new information comes out. Because clarity is the difference between stress and confidence when policies change quietly like this. Now, let's bring everything together clearly so you walk away understanding what this update actually means for your money and not just reacting to noise. Because the biggest risk right now is not missing relief, it is misunderstanding how this revised plan works and making assumptions that lead to stress or poor decisions. What we know at this point is that the relief plan is allegedly moving forward in a quieter, more controlled way than past stimulus efforts. It is targeted instead of broad, phased instead of all at once, and driven by existing data rather than new applications. That combination explains why some people will see relief sooner while others hear nothing at first. And it also explains why there is no single date everyone can circle on a calendar. Timing is individualized now, not universal, and that is uncomfortable for people used to clear deadlines, but it is more accurate to how modern benefit systems operate. So, how should you think about this realistically? First, understand that eligibility is not a judgment, it is a snapshot. It reflects how your situation appears in federal records at this moment, not how hard you are struggling or how responsible you have been. Second, understand that silence does not mean denial. It often means sequencing or data alignment. And third, understand that relief plans like this rarely close the door permanently. They expand, pause, adjust, and recalibrate as conditions change. That is why officials are being cautious with promises. They do not want people making financial decisions based on assumed money that may arrive later than expected. Now, here is where staying subscribed and engaged actually protects you. Not because of hype, but because updates like this evolve quietly. Details change in small but important ways, and missing one clarification can cost you time or cause unnecessary worry. Following accurate updates helps you avoid mistakes that come from rumor-driven decisions, and that matters when you are dealing with fixed income or tight budgets. Now let's talk about what not to do. Do not rely on screenshots claiming inside information. Do not assume a friend's deposit means your payment is late, and do not panic if you do not see immediate movement. Those reactions create stress without changing outcomes. What does change outcomes is accuracy, patience, and awareness. Making sure your information is correct, understanding how phased relief works, and staying grounded while the system does its work. And here is the final reassurance you need to hear. This update is not a warning that help is disappearing. It is a sign that policymakers are trying to deliver support in a way that holds up over time, quietly, carefully, and with fewer mistakes. And while that may not feel dramatic, it is often how real assistance actually arrives. So, if you're watching this and feeling uncertain, you are already doing the right thing by staying informed. That puts you ahead of most people. If this breakdown helped you make sense of what is happening, share it with someone who might be confused right now, and keep your notifications on so you don't miss the next update as this develops. Clarity is protection, and when relief moves quietly like this, understanding the process is what keeps you calm, prepared, and in control.